This is episode 1137.
I think it's important to create trust and psychological safety within teams to drive high performance. It's not always just about numbers. It's about the people behind the numbers, behind the execution. I love to role model how my team should be showing up. And I take that quite seriously. And I also ensure that they understand where I'm heading, and that gives them psychological safety and trust as one team, and we operate in one direction and not several directions. And that often is the key to creating fast, high-performing team. Not just high-performing, but we move really fast together because we're totally aligned. And that psychological safety takes time to nurture, create every day.
When a CFO tells you she listens to sales calls to uncover growth opportunities, you know this isn't a numbers-only conversation. In my talk with Ignition CFO Amy Foo, we step inside the mindset of a finance leader who turned customer pain points into multi-million-dollar wins. From being the lone finance hire in a fast-growing region to steering global operations, Amy has learned that clarity and conviction move organizations faster than complexity ever could. Our talk with CFO Amy Foo begins after this. Hello, CFO Amy Foo is with us. Amy's career spans more than 2 decades across the software and professional services sector with leadership roles at Zendesk, Culture Amp, and now Ignition. We can mention that at Zendesk, she served as both a managing director for Australia and New Zealand and was global SVP of finance operations. So experiences that clearly honed her ability to lead at scale while staying customer focused. Amy, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Jack. Great to be here.
Good to have you. Hey, so where are you today, by the way?
I'm in Sydney, Australia.
You're in Sydney today.
I normally
Yeah.
I lived in Melbourne. Yeah.
Amy, we have the same question for you as we do any geography. Take us back in time. We're interested to know what you think were the experiences that helped prepare you to become a CFO. What would those be?
I think I could start with who I am quickly and then bring you to those experiences. I'm Amy Foo, CFO at Ignition, born and raised in Malaysia, proudly Australian. Quite a non-traditional CFO. As you said, I'm an MD at one point in time, managed sales when the company was smaller, and also led finance, which is always my core job. I love growth. I love building. I love bringing a lot of operational rigor to make things happen. Often always the curious and continuous learning one, and I jump into new challenges very quickly to see what's possible. So what excites me the most is, at this point in Ignition, is driving high growth business and clarity, alignment, and discipline, which brings you back to the question you said, what shapes me as a CFO today? A lot of it is about clarity, alignment, and data-driven discipline. Firstly, clarity. Experiences like Ignition is often about growing fast and having several priorities at the same time. And as a CFO, you have a job to provide clear focus and a capital allocation, which then drives the right levers to grow the business. often I take the role of simplifying the complex and down to, at this point, several measures, and often three very common ones are ARR, revenue growth, and at Ignition is payments, volume, and also cash flow. So once people saw how their work can tie to very clear, measurable levers, it often allows them to get to outcomes faster, and execution and accountability then flows. So those are one of those things that shaped me as a CFO today, and I carry them throughout most experiences, and I level them depending on the maturity of the company. And
way back when you began in professional services, like so many finance executives, you were at E&Y for a while. You were at KPMG as well. When you leave, do you want to get to the tech sector? Was it just an opportunity sprung up to go tech, or was it deliberate, I guess?
it was a trial and error that became a passion, I would say. As with all finance graduate, you come out and you want to be part of a Big Four, and I was part of a Big Four twice. So my first job was with Ernst & Young, and it was very enriching as a new hire to understand what giving a independent opinion is all about. When you are with your clients and your clients are in the weeds, and in the weeds of the business, trying to grow the business, and yet they have to tell their shareholders that the finances are in good shape. So our role is to go in and actually they see us as inspectors of the books, when actually we are trying to help them form an opinion that your business is functioning as it should. So very early on, I find that auditors are not very well liked. But that was not the reason why I left auditing, because I actually enjoy auditing pretty much. But when you look at the room far away where the partner was seated, am I going to be one of those partners? And in 20 years' time, I don't see myself as one of them. So very quickly, for trial and error reasons, a friend called me up and said, hey, there is a job in IBM, and we are building new things and trialing shared services, and we need a lot of accountants to actually transform the business model at IBM. Would you be interested? So I kind of jumped on the opportunity, and that's how I landed in software very early on. And the second time I was back in Big Four was my husband now, boyfriend then, had to move to Singapore from Malaysia, and I thought that going back into Big Four will be a great opportunity to understand the business landscape and finance, compliance world, and KPMG came along, and I took that opportunity again. But nonetheless, it proved to me again, I do not want to be that partner in the room. So very quickly, I left for a software experiences at BA Systems, which eventually got acquired by Oracle.
So you were with IBM, that was in Malaysia. Then you moved to Singapore with your husband. BA Systems was also in Malaysia. When do you come to Melbourne or
That's somewhere further down. So my boss then at BA Systems went to a company called Serena Software, which has a global presence, and they needed a very strong finance leader to lead the Australian subsidiary, which has a few locations in Australia. And that was when I was asked to consider the opportunity. And when you were without kids, you can go anywhere. So my husband now and I packed our bags and went to Australia and took on the opportunity and never looked back.
What were you ever at risk of, and maybe you did have a stint where you were thought of as an accountant and you had to demonstrate that you could think strategically, that you could, step into FP&A, and play a broader role there as well. Did you face that or not really?
When I started at Zendesk, which was very small, and then grew very quickly to IPO, post-IPO, and post-IPO. At the starting point, I was employee number one in the region, and
Yeah.
you have to do everything. So that's when FP&A does come in very strongly, because you do need to build plans for many countries in the region to help propel the growth.
But meanwhile, the mothership is, we're based here in the States, Zendesk. Is it out of Silicon
Bay
Valley?
Area.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Bay Area. So, you interviewed for that role. You got it. So they must think she's an independent. She'll be able to do this. I just think it's like the hiring manager thought, and why? Why did they think you were the right person for that? Again, you had existed in IBM and these much larger companies.
I was the first finance employee in the region. There were a few salespeople and a
Yeah,
few CX and support people, probably 20 in total. So they probably saw the grit and resilience in me to be able to build. And ultimately, at that point in time, it's the hands-onness and the willingness to do FP&A, accounting, managing outsourcer accounting, and taxes and filing of audited accounts is almost everything, but
yeah.
still have the ability to have the growth mindset to drive growth in the region, which is what ultimately the reason why I took the job. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're sort of the regions or the geographies finance team. You had to do it all, more or less. Okay. And as it grew, you were able to build out that team, or how did it work?
Yes. Eventually, M&As happen. You inherit
Okay. Yep.
teams and you hire teams, but regional teams are always slightly smaller than the HQ.
Yep.
And when post IPO, there were clearer capabilities that we want to have location strategy on, and the team really grew thereafter. Mm.
Yeah. And you mentioned acquisitions. So did that help you? Was the company acquiring for talent in the region? Why? Yeah. The many things probably drove the acquisitions, but is that what you were referring to or no?
Yes, it was a business acquisition, actually, not just acquired. Like
Yeah.
you're not just acquiring talent. It
Right.
was to allow the CX product to have chat capability and mobile capability very quickly, which is very important for most of our customers then.
Now, and I just want to point out, because you made an investment of nearly 9 years with Zendesk, and during that time, you sort of arrived there, and it was a rather senior role, finance director, but as you described, you were it. You were the finance person for that region. But you become a senior vice president of the region, and I imagine this team grew up beneath you. I imagine you reported to the CFO. How am I doing? Am I close to what the role was?
Close, but not quite exact. As the company grew and grow and grow, your regional role, if you have trust and credibility of C-suite, often you're given both the people leading role as well as your core function role. So my core function role was SVP of Global Finance Operations, and it was a global role out of Australia to lead operations, deal desk, billings, and shared services, which was quite huge. And my team, by the time I left Zendesk, was about nearly 150 people globally in 7 countries. So
Wow.
that was an enriching role, and I will forever be grateful for that experience. The other role that I really enjoy, which is quite non-traditional, and hence I call myself a non-traditional CFO, is I was given the ability and opportunity to lead the region as a managing director. And that means my job is to translate the company strategy, the company goal, the company vision to the entire Australia and New Zealand offices to make sure that people from different departments are able to work towards the same goal. That means often I hold regional all hands. I am the PR face for Zendesk APAC. So, and I also grew the subsidiaries, and I'm where I need to be, like Japan and Philippines, if I need to distill strategy in those offices as well.
And I'm just thinking that when that decision was made to make you a managing director, it was because, you were a known entity. You had been there through those growth period years. You were known widely across and had the confidence of, your peers as well as your bosses. How am I doing?
You're doing well.
No, but I mean, that had to be exciting for you. Did you, there was no hesitation. There was no like, well, this is kind of a little bit out of my lane. I'd like to someday be a CFO, and this isn't necessarily a prerequisite for that, although it does speak volumes about my, how well respected I am within the company.
Well, if there's one advice I would give myself, the younger self,
Yes.
about career, I think career is not linear, and it's those opportunities that your mentors and sponsors sees you before you even sees it. You see it yourself, and your courage to grab those new challenges that are non-traditional are the ones that will shape you in future.
Along the way, did you frequently raise your hand for new opportunities? Did you have to learn how to do that? Were you overlooked initially, perhaps, because you didn't assert yourself? Again, a lot of career builders along the way tell us it's something that they learned the hard way, and suddenly they found themselves raising their hand more frequently, realizing that it really did open the door, realizing if they did volunteer to help or join a project, it did, often it was recognized. I don't know if that's your experience, but tell us about, were you always somebody who raised your hand or no?
No, because as a leader located in the region for a global company, the imposter syndrome is real. And you try to fit in, you try to make yourself look like everyone at the HQ, very much earlier in your career, and you see a ceiling that gets artificially created because you're located in the region. And that was how I felt initially younger in career. It was a really good mentor and sponsor that changed my mindset altogether when a lot of global opportunities were popping up, and they needed someone really capable. And despite region, they would offer that to me. And I would often doubt myself if I could do those roles, because if you're working with a CRO who's located in the Bay Area every day, they need turnaround, they need fast decision making. And often you doubt if you're the right person to be the right hand for finance as a business partner for the C-level. But being given the opportunity, being spoken about in rooms where I was not in, and being put up for those roles, it made me change into a leader that has no barrier in region, has no barrier in ceiling. And from there on, it's all about capability and mindset.
Well, that's interesting. Mentorship. Again, you worked at IBM. Some of these companies are known for their mentorship. sometimes it doesn't take root. Sometimes it does. Any thoughts on acquiring mentors along the way? Do it sooner rather than later? And anything you can offer people?
Do it sooner rather than later. Identify them as they come along. For me, they come along in the most unusual way. They are the most critical people in your life that gives you the hardest feedback that you don't want to hear at times in your career. But I realize they are the best people you want to keep around you because they tell you the truth and they take time to tell you the truth. So these are people I will always be grateful for, and I'll always still be in touch with. Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. That's great insight. Not everybody understands criticism is some of the best forms of mentorship. Yeah. So thank you for that. Thank you for allowing me to ask you, a few more additional questions there. Okay. So let's find out about this company that you stepped into as a CFO earlier. I think at the start of the year, somewhere around 2025. Is that right?
Early this year. Yeah.
Early this year, 2025, January. So take us back. What was this opportunity that you saw? Ignition. Tell us about this company.
Ignition is a SaaS and payments platform for accountants, bookkeepers, and professional services firms. As a CFO, I've lived the reality of spending too much time chasing invoices, reconciling payments, and managing complex revenue cycles. So times like this could be better spent in value-added work and definitely leading strategy. So that's why what we do at Ignition really resonates deeply with me. We help firms and agencies sell, build, get paid. And more than that, we give them the control over their revenue growth and cash flow management. And Ignition, in many ways, automates prospects to payments, and finance leaders and business owners can focus on driving growth rather than the grind. So when payments are automated, they get attached to signed agreements. And imagine a world with zero AR, and that is what we create for many accountants, bookkeepers, and professional services firms. It gets the stress out of needing to manage cash flow. And that to me is a real what sets us apart from other automation tools, very much from helping companies grow rather than helping them increase productivity. So recently too, we have launched our new AI Price Insights, which sits behind many years of proprietary benchmarking data, which helps professional firms price with clarity and confidence. Yeah.
So can you tell us, maybe provide an abbreviated history of the company's capital structure?
It's private equity and venture capital.
A combination of both. All right. Well, tell us something about your lines of sight here. I mean, what are the primary financial metrics related to that allow you to see whether the platform is operating efficiently?
One of the new sources of data that we're digging very much into to align to the strategy of the company is there's increasing focus in measuring revenue and margins at the segment level. Ignition's business model is evolving rapidly, and we're selling into the US and the Australian market, both from a small business and going up market. So going mid-market, going enterprise. And I need a more granular view to help us identify where to invest more, where to scale, where to pivot sometimes, where to stop. So all of which informs both our go-to-market strategy as well as our product strategy, and sales motions that we've just launched as well, like product-led growth versus sales-assisted growth. So beyond financial data, we're trying to dig a lot into product usage analytics at some point, trying to do that as soon as possible with products like Amplitude, and pricing trends, to make sure that our value proposition, with the segments are right, and payment behaviors from our customers on when payment usages peak and when the seasonality comes too is a really important level, not to just understand performance, but drive strategy behind them.
Can you tell us something about how you go about allocating resources across product development? What's the criteria here? Where are you looking to spend capital? Invest.
There's a great book by Jeffrey Moore called Zone to Win. I go back to that book every now and then when I do my planning cycle, and this was introduced to me from one of a great CFO that I've learned from. And that book, I use it many different ways, and there is investment horizons that you pair your investment allocation with ARR velocity, if that makes sense. So if I have revenue streams that will produce ARR and stable, and proven, those are the places where you need to ensure it's humming 200%. And you need to understand the revenue allocation and capacity that's needed in that area to ensure that there is proven revenue. And this normally forms like 60%, 70% of your revenue. And there is a horizon of revenue that is the next clearest accelerant that is quite proven, but not quite proven yet. And you want to make sure it becomes a proven revenue stream. And
Yep.
you would allocate probably a good 20, 30 is my gauge to make sure that you test it out and you give it the life that is needing to then become a full revenue stream that is going to give you a full year of ARR velocity in the next 2 to 3 years. And then there's this little bucket of being a technology company. You always have the science projects that creates future innovation, and you can't not have innovation as a technology company. And those are the ones that I would normally have more discipline around the company to make sure that existing employees carve out a portion of their time working on probably 5 to 10% of the entire company's resources and new resources to actually continue to drive innovation for 2 to 5 years' time.
Yeah. So can you tell us, we're always interested in the go-to-market organization. And I mean, again, you arrived earlier this year. Can you tell us how you have sought to, build that collaboration that's required with that go-to-market team on things like pricing and monetization? That all comes into play there as well.
Pricing and monetization, and what our customers are willing to pay for, it's always a very interesting bucket of collaboration with marketing, sales teams, and understanding what we think we can make revenue from and what the reality is often sometimes different. But to make them the same, you have to look at the top of funnel metrics, how your sales are coming through, organic and non-organic, and talking to marketers on quality of leads and the coverage of pipeline, and making sure that the business has enough fuel from a marketing budget perspective to fund all the needs of acquiring new customers, and then hand off to sales to make sure they have a really collegial muscle together to close deals, is always something fascinating. And I look at those metrics daily, not kidding, daily, to ensure that the marketing spend is efficient. And if they're not, can we shift very quickly to actually pivot to channels that will actually bring us more revenue?
Yeah. So just interesting how you operate as a leader then. Again, as you looked at those numbers daily, as you emphasized to us, did you seek to educate the go-to-market team in some new way, or bring a certain metric that perhaps was to the right, bring it front and center for discussion more than once to emphasize, here's where I think we need to make a difference. Here's what perhaps we hasn't been part of the conversation as much as it should be. Am I describing something that you're familiar with?
Yes, very much. The most interesting metric, which is not always very common, is what actually your customers are paying for your product. And what I mean that is not your list price that you put on your website. It's not the published pricing that you show potential customers. Is what you actually land and what you're able to sell actual customers that walk through the door that wants to use your product. That often links back to value proposition of your product and willingness to pay, and being able to analyze average sales price by segment, by customer size, by customer needs sometimes allows you to repackage your prices and rethink how features in your product suite can actually create value for different cohorts or different verticals in your customer. And I think that is something that every CFO needs to often look in and go a bit deeper, because understanding your customer ultimately and willingness to pay in different segments and different verticals is where you often can propel and double down on if you do it right.
The company recently launched what I think you called AI Price Insights. From a financial perspective, how does Ignition evaluate the return on innovation for these types of new AI-driven product capabilities?
We're not very different from many tech companies where there is initial product and market research being done on customer needs, the customer base we have and who would need them, and also the new customers coming through, how would that propel value proposition for them as well? And the research goes into the pricing based on our current product and how would that stack as an add-on to the product to increase stickiness and retention eventually for growing with Ignition. That is always the core to value. Less about the dollars initially, and the dollars will then come as you start to see proof points of take up and proof points of retention due to the product. So that's when we start tracking it for the next few months from the initial research we've done and going out to market with the initial pricing.
Yeah, so you mentioned it originated from some benchmarking that had been done, but what is really the underlying data or business considerations that supported its development, the AI Price Insights tool?
What we normally see with a lot of our Ignition customer is the difficulty of changing pricing. Say you're a tax agent, you want to bill hourly and you rather not bill in a recurring manner or fixed price because you worry that your customers may not want to do it. And I think with pricing insights and benchmarking, we can show what best in class industry normally does pricing, and it can be recurring, it can be fixed price, it can be less burdensome to a lot of these firms in how they think about pricing, and it often transforms how they price confidently and with clarity if it's shown that a lot of firms have done it and this can be done.
We want to continue to talk a little bit about AI with you. We're wondering about how the company itself might be using it. I mean, what are some of the maybe more immediate opportunities to apply AI. And maybe we can speak specifically about finance. Where do you see AI being applied for finance? Again, forecasting, planning, process automation. What's the sweet spot here?
There's a lot to be had with AI internally. We just spoke about externally.
Mhm.
Um, I'm simpler when it comes to applying AI. I don't think this needs to be a real overnight change in our internal stack. The reason why I say that is often I hear companies like ripping and replacing their entire software stack for new shiny AI tools. Often that is possible if you have an army of teams that does nothing but AI transformation. In a smaller company, often it is more naturalistic. And when I say that is, we look at our existing vendors first. Your Zeros, your Intuit, your NetSuite, to look for what they're building in their AI product. And all of them would have an AI product roadmap, and you kind of want to use what's coming already in your stack first, before you go for the next shiny thing out
Yeah.
there, because reaping and replacing is cost. And I think that is the simplistic mindset I have for my team today. Of course, when you go into a new year and when planning is in season, you often look at capabilities you're missing. And that's when new tools can come in. And when you're evaluating new tools these days, often you want to have the best in class, best price tool out there. And AI definitely has democratized a lot of the entry and barrier to not having automation. And these days they are very much more affordable. And I think that's when new capabilities can be and should be evaluated. Yeah.
Let's ask you about the risks associated with AI here. What are some of the challenges or risks that concern you most about adopting AI?
It's not a magic pill. So I think a lot of folks think that by having AI, you can do away with a lot of the traditional resources. I think it's a balance of both. It allows you to have space. It automates the mundane. It creates more headspace. And it removes repetitive pressure, definitely, and gives room for your teams and your customers to focus on the strategic and value creating work. But it's definitely not a magic pill that will take away everything. And I think a lot of folks fall into that trap of AI can transform everything and go a bit too on the other spectrum.
Just want to, I'm curious whether you organize your team a little differently or something that you've learned along the way. And specifically, I guess I'm thinking of FP&A professionals. Is there something you task them with? Do you develop them differently? Do you, can you reflect a little on your FP&A team with us?
Yes. FP&A teams are really important strategic business partners in the business, in my mind. And some of them, when I first inherit them, it's quite common that they don't work with the business, but they work in the business. And often it's not a big change to make that happen. The teams I have almost have the most amazing domain business knowledge. They have the ability to forecast and plan very well. They understand the levels better than anyone does in the company. But often the mindset shift that's needed, and often I bring that to the team, is you need to connect the dots to actionable strategy and drive outcomes rather than reporting the news. So that is a really subtle but important mindset change that I would like every FP&A tool that I lead, every FP&A team that I lead, practice daily, because when you're able to continuously forecast on a quarterly basis and adjust what is needing more time and accelerate what is able to be accelerated, the business transforms and is able to grow at a really high agility because of that strategic business partnering that FP&A can bring.
Okay, well, thank you for that. We're going to move to what we like to refer to as our finance strategic moment question. And again, this is where we just ask for one moment of insight. We know you've had 3 of these already today, but we're asking you for just one. It might have happened 20 years ago, might have happened last week. Anything come to mind when we ask for a finance strategic moment?
I'm not a traditional CFO, so one of the hats and one of the teams I've led before is a global deal desk team at a public SaaS company. So our pricing model, when I first joined and led that team, working alongside a lot of enterprise sales teams across the globe, is around selling by per seat, which is very common for SaaS. And it worked very well when I looked at all the deals that we were doing and the sizes of the deals we were doing for smaller customers and mid-level customers. But as we start to expand into large enterprise, and we wonder why our deal size are not getting to 1 to 5 million per year, that's when I started listening into some of the sales calls, and also what the customers were asking for and what we eventually sell, to those bigger deals. And these are big customers, like back then they were booming, like the rideshare companies. They were trying to buy, the product for their drivers. Restaurants, they were trying to buy the product for their franchisees. And financial brokers, they were trying to buy the product for many franchisee brokers around the network. So these are data that tells us that something is off and we're not quite hitting the mark on some of these big customer use cases that has very strong demand. And how can we pull these deals that we were closing at smaller clips into bigger clips? And I talk millions when I talk about large enterprise deals. So the high friction here is actually understanding the seasonality that the customers need. And they actually have different seasonality. For example, a rideshare company will need more drivers during a holiday season. And that is when they don't like pricing that is fixed, because they need it to actually alter the needs of their teams. And restaurants, the same. They have peak season, they have holiday seasons, and brokers have high selling seasons, financial quarters, and they will need more seats back then. So we created this seat mentality where you can buy a few years or a year or pool seats, and you have flexibility to go up and down within those months, as long as you stay within the number of pool seats that you bought. So instead of buying, for example, 100 seats per month, you can buy 1,200 seats per year. And we don't care if you use it on your first month up to 200 straight up, you still have 1,000 to go for 11 months. And if you exhaust those seats even faster, and it's even better for business, we sell you top-ups in bundles thereafter to allow you to flex. And that immediately kick off in some regions, and definitely with rideshare companies, because it was such a big shift back then. And we saw deals went from clips of 500K to 1 to 5 million within those 2 years. And the model shifted a lot internally too on how we needed to track those pooled seats to make sure that we're allowing customer flexibility, but we're also creating relationships and conversations with customer on how they're using the product and their seasonality that they often themselves don't realize. So that to me was a moment where finance could create a pivotal moment by going pretty deep and listening to sales calls, which is not very traditional, but trying to crack a nut to see if there is something to be had if we meet our customers where they are and actually understanding what they need and turning up again at their door and actually proposing something different to actually allow them to use our product better and in turn grow our revenue 7 times per customer. Yeah.
Is that right? Was that the outcome? 6 to 7 times. Wow. Oh, great example for us. Thank you for that. We always like to, we jump to the mentoring round now where we once more ask you to look back and, we want you to think about, and again, it wasn't too long ago, but you've had many different leadership roles along the way. You mentioned imposter syndrome, which I think is interesting. We're wondering if you could go back in time to that time where you did take on quite a bit of a leadership role for the first time. What is the piece of advice you would give yourself looking back? And again, you're trying to assess what it is that would have helped you then, what it is that you didn't know then that you could whisper in your ear right now. What would that be?
I wish someone would have told me that being a great leader, a finance leader especially, isn't just about numbers. It's about narrative and conviction. A lot of times my job is to translate the finance goals into executional strategy. And if you can't do that for the business, often you can't get them to the financial goals. So the numbers is able to help you tell the story, but being able to drive the business and lead financial storytelling and narrative makes the business believe what can be and what needs to be.
Amy, we always like to ask our guests to reflect a little on the personal side for us. I know that early on you made several career moves with your husband, but what else can you tell us? Something perhaps your colleagues don't know about you. What would you share?
A lot of people don't know that I'm a bit of a car enthusiast. I absolutely love my Mini Cooper. And
Mini
this
Cooper.
This is my fun ride. And I've had them in different colors. And this is my third color already. I currently have a red Mini Cooper.
Oh, really?
And yeah.
Your first Mini Cooper, did you have one 20 years ago? Or was this something that's happened in the last decade?
15 years ago, I started having a Mini Cooper. And I can parallel parking spaces most people can't even try. So they're really fun to drive in. A few others that people may or may not know. I have 3 CPAs because of the places I've lived in and the places I've worked in. And I can speak 7 languages and dialects because of the way I've grown up. So quite a strange mix of precision and curiosity if you have it. Yeah.
So you had to get accredited in 3 different jurisdictions then, is that right? I mean, can you share with us, was there one that was just more of a headache than the others? I mean, are they all similarly challenging, or was one more bureaucratic in some way?
I think the Singapore one was the harder one to get. They were more rigorous in the testing. They wanted to make sure you go through ethics, you go through experiences, you go through financial tests. So they were very up there in terms of standards of what they expect a CPA to be in Singapore.
What about, and I think you mentioned a text to us earlier, but what about a business book or a resource that's influenced your thinking in some way?
So I spoke about Jeffrey Moore, Zone to Win earlier because it teaches you how to think about resource allocation and transformation and ARR velocity, revenue velocity. Every CFO eventually forced to think about the tension between running core business and funding new revenue stream. So this is a book that gives you great framework to think about balancing investment allocation and revenue. The second book I would say, which is my favorite, when I read it, it resonates with my leadership style, and hence I like it very much, is Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek.
That's a great selection. No, it's been brought up recently again too, and I know it's been out for several years, but thank you for mentioning that book once again. Tell us something more. Why did it resonate with you?
I think it's important to create trust and psychological safety within teams to drive high performance. It's not always just about numbers. It's about the people behind the numbers, behind the execution that can take you really far from being good to great. So that book resonates very much to me because I love to role model how my team should be showing up. And I take that quite seriously. And I also ensure that they understand where I'm heading, and that gives them psychological safety and trust as one team, and we operate in one direction and not several directions. And that often is the key to creating fast, high-performing team. Not just high-performing, but we move really fast together because we're totally aligned. And that psychological safety takes time to nurture, create every day. So that book really resonates with me. And when I read it, it's like, this is me. And I want to make sure that I'll continue to remember to be this person that the book is trying to portray. Yeah.
Great choice. Thank you. We are up to our final question. We'll ask you to look forward now for us. We're interested in your priorities as a CFO for the coming 12 months. What would those be?
Yeah, it's about setting Ignition up for scale, both from a multi-segment, multi-region, and multi-product company. So to do that, we need to drive optimal growth and also have strong efficiency from a cash flow perspective. What does this mean? It means we need to deepen the understanding of the growth levers by region and the different behaviors customers have by segment. And I spoke about the metrics I'm digging in and the resources we need to allocate appropriately when we want to grow some hard things that are harder to grow, like brand in the new region is really hard to grow. So making sure that my role as a CFO is to set up the right infrastructure to allow the right capital allocation to support places where we really want to invest in and we see huge ARR velocity in the next year, and ensuring we also have data and decision framework to support that and pivot very quickly.
Amy Foo, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thank you for having me, Jack. It was really fun.